one of the best things I've come across so far is seeing a VC capitalist, right? Seeing an angel investor sitting right in front of me. Because I feel like they're very secret person, like they're just there to invest in your companies, but no one has actually come out and made a content about it, right? Especially in India, I think, right? I think you are the one person that is coming out and building a
Mhm.
content about VC capitalists because we've never seen the other side of the story, right?
Yeah.
We've known a little bit about how founders go through, how is their journey, but we haven't learned about a VC capitalist. We haven't come across the idea of what they go through.
No, that's correct. I think the venture capital industry is actually very opaque. Like people haven't known much about it until very recently, and that too mostly in the US. I think people in India are starting to recognize that hey, this is something that people appreciate. So as I think it's a matter of time as well now. So think about it this way: we're now 15 years, 20 years old as an ecosystem in startups. The founders of today are more mature. 10 years back, the VCs were so few that even if you weren't there in the public, you weren't talking much about what you do, you would still be the people that founders talk to, right? Because there were just like 10 people, right? Like 10 institutions you would talk to all as a founder. But now there are so many. We're in a world of like, there must be 250, 300 VC funds in the country at the least, which means a founder has so many options. So let's say you start up, you come back and you're like, I want to build a company in India. You wouldn't know where to go to, so you would start with the internet. And if on the internet you don't find information about certain investors, you'll probably not approach them, which means for them this is a lost opportunity, because if they can't talk to you, they can definitely not invest in your company. So I think people are becoming more aware about this, and there are some funds in India actually doing good work in the last 2 3 years to actually put out a lot of content. And some peers around me also that I'm really inspired by their work. They're trying to do good stuff. So Matrix Partners in India, which is also a US fund, they're doing really good content in India. There's a fund called Axel, which is also in the US. They were first investors in Facebook. So that's one of their biggest hits. They in India are doing some really good content, and bunch of people. But I don't. I think there's a difference in doing content for the sake of it versus for genuinely adding value. And I think
Hmm.
we're coming to the latter now. I think initially it started off as, hey, everybody else is doing it, so we might want to put ourselves out there a bit as well. I don't think that compounds. I think a large part of what I also got right, and I don't think I planned it, but I just told myself, hey, let's do this for a year. I'll put an episode every week and let's see where it goes, without any expectation. And I think that just compounded, which means discipline, consistency compounds. However, as a VC fund, things are very abrupt. This is not what you do for a living. This is not what derive. This is not what gives you joy, or perhaps this is not very natural to your work, right? Which means that you will not do it consistently. You will be more abrupt about it, and that will then become a bottleneck because it won't show you results. And then if you're very ROI minded about a podcast or a blog or a report, I don't think you do it enough. So I think now people are trying to internalize that, hey, no, I already do. As a VC fund, you do such great research work. That's your job, primarily, right? You have such great insights. We just have to put it out there. We have to make all of these things accessible to as many founders. And if we as an ecosystem do that, knowledge will not be a bar for any founder who wants to start. I think that's my personal mission, and everybody reckons with it. But I think VC funds are coming around, and I think a lot of founders are now able to search for good content. We're still a long way to go. I think the US ecosystem, in comparison, you will have a lot of vertical content for things like just fundraising, for just sales, for just product, for just marketing. We're not there yet. We're still very, in fact, I'm privy of this as well. My podcast is also mostly general on founders and on venture capital investors, right? However, I do also want to get to a point where, let's say, I'm sure in 5 years in India, you'll have a podcast specifically for marketing, specifically for VC, specifically for angel investors. And that will come up soon as well, because I think the founder of today is very smart, and they are looking for these options. And people will just figure it out that we should, raise our hand and build it out.
Now that you've said that, like, we're at stage that in next 5 to 10 years, India will see a lot of podcasts around marketing and around like VCs, around angel investors. How do you think branding plays a role in that? How a VC capitalist or angel investors create their branding so that it's also easy for founders to find them, and also it's like, like equal relationship between them.
So, foundationally, the important principle to understand is that, hey, if there's a good founder out there, capital will chase that founder, because there will be three, four funds which will recognize that, hey, this is a great founder and we want to invest in them, which means it will become the founder's choice to actually take capital from one out of the four funds, hypothetically, right? Which means this founder will now go to an investor that he or she respects, really wants to take capital from, and admires. Now, this respect and admiration needs to come across via social media, and thus creating content in some shape or form only benefits you. And it does not have to come at the cost of additional time, effort. Like sometimes when we think of building a brand or thinking of creating content, right, we think of it as to the extreme, right? Which is like, hey, I want to get like millions of followers, or hey, I don't want to do it at all. But I do think there's a very viable in between, which is to say that, hey, whatever I already do, let me put out for very little effort. And if that compounds, if there are serious folks who read it, I think I will anyway grow some amount of following. I think that's also been a very crucial learning. And if VCs do this well, then the founders of tomorrow will, in the next 5 years, let's say there's a very good founder today in college, they're 20 years old. By the time they're 25, they would, read all your content, because that will be so value additive for them. And the next day, when they start to build a company 5 years later, they will be like, hey, I really admire this person for putting out their thoughts. Can I go and take capital from them? It builds really strong trust, it builds a strong brand, and it makes your capital desirable, so that founders come to you, approach you. So I think this is going to be a very natural step. A lot of folks have started to realize it. I do think we're yet to see a lot of mainstream successes from it. We have a couple founders who've done this well. There's a great podcast called The Barber Shop with Shantanu Deshpande. He's the founder of a company, and he has some really great conversations with founders. There's also another founder called Mukesh Bansal. He started one unicorn in India called Cult, which is a premier aggregator of gyms in the country. And he's also built Mintra, which is the fashion e-commerce marketplace acquired by Flipkart. And he also has a very thriving podcast now. So I think podcasts are now becoming, in a very strong way, mainstream. We also have the example of Nikhil Kamath. He's a billionaire from India. He's built the company Zerodha. And he's having some incredible conversations on his podcast. So I think folks are recognizing the power of social media. And I know on a day-to-day basis, across weeks in the last 3 4 years, I've had so many conversations with venture investors from funds talking about, hey, we want to do this, we want to do a podcast, we want to figure something out, can we, like, understand what you do? And that's been so nice to see, because I've actually seen that transition, like at a point where I could question the number of podcasts that were there talking about entrepreneurship in India, to now there being enough, if not plenty, and there will also be more. And I'm hoping that there will be more. So I think it's pretty good. And we could, I mean, if let's say you want to understand more about India as an ecosystem, right, I would question the number of options you would have to understand about India. I would also question, let's say, is there a podcast that bridges the India US gap? So I mean, there are so many, like, if we have to question where are these options, then we will have answers in a couple of years if we don't have immediately.